Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone, and welcome to Wealth Pathways, the Affluence Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Marie Stella, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. You may have been to a leadership workshop before, perhaps at school or as a part of your workplace, but how can empowered leadership tie into affluence? Today, we're exploring this concept of empowerment in relationship to leadership with our expert, Robert Heath. Robert Heath is an author, engaging communicator, and leading expert in empowering leadership. His work is centered on helping leaders get the best out of themselves and those that work for them. Robert received his JD cum laude from the University of Illinois College of Law. He also holds an MA in teaching from Christian Brothers University, as well as dual bachelor degrees in economics and speech communications from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Robert served for 8 years as a United States Marine Corps officer and was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal for his leadership as a commander of one of the largest companies in the Marine Corps. Combining the leadership principles he learned as an officer and company commander in the United States Marine Corps with the personnel development strategies he has mastered over 20 years of leading, teaching, and coaching, Robert works with leaders who desire to increase productivity, initiative, and follow through, reduce stress, and get the very best out of their team on every project, regardless of who they may lead. So, hi, Robert. Welcome to the show today.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So to get us started with some introductory questions, can you tell us a bit more about that background and what led you to be so passionate about leadership?
Yeah, it's actually a long story that I'll make a little bit shorter for the benefit of the audience. I'm from Chicago originally, in Illinois in the United States. And one of the things that I always say is I kind of grew up, I was blessed to grow up what I call hood adjacent. So we didn't live in the hood. We weren't, I wasn't stuck in certain situations. I went to good schools and saw that there were different ways to live. But then I also had my family members, my friends in the church that I went to, all of kind of my experiences were in kind of the impoverished areas in the city. And so I got to see that there were two worlds. And so I grew up wanting to figure out how we could change kind of all of the urban dynamics that many of us grew up with. And for me, it was growing up in the 80s and the 90s. And in the US, there was a lot of kind of school to prison pipeline and generational poverty and things like that were that were constantly plaguing my friends, my family, and people that I cared about. And so I started on a journey to become a teacher. And that's how I got my master's degree in teaching, and to go and really help in education, to get into the schools, to get into helping people to be better. And one of the things that happened while I was on that journey, working to be a superintendent, I had become a teacher. I was a basketball coach. I was a school improvement team coordinator. I was, a union member and a union representative. And during that period of time, I got to see kind of a window into my future. I saw a superintendent that came to Memphis City Schools where I was teaching at the time. She was originally a graduate of Memphis City Schools. She had gone out to the eastern portion of the United States, into the Massachusetts area, gotten her degrees, had all the letters behind her name, had the qualifications. She had even worked in the job. She had been a superintendent in another school system before. She had the credentials. She had the bona fides, if you would. And she came back and she was leading our school system. And I believed that she could actually solve the problem, that she could do what we need to do. But one of the things that I noticed was 18 months later, she was gone. And throughout that period of time, I realized that there were a number of things that she wasn't good at, even though she was qualified, even though she was capable, even though she knew what to do. it wasn't that she failed because she didn't have the qualifications, didn't have the intelligence, didn't have the aptitude. What she was missing was the ability to galvanize people, to empower people, to make her vision a reality. And I saw it and I realized that that was me in 20 years if I didn't figure out how to lead, if I didn't learn how to be a better leader, if I didn't understand how to truly become someone who earns influence and respect from others, who empowers others to make the world a better place. And so that kind of sent me on this journey of trying to figure out, how can I be a better leader? What does leadership even look like at the highest levels? And that's where I went to law school to really understand the system. How do we interact with each other? How do we come up with our social contract? How do we decide what's right and what's wrong in society? And then I also went to what I like to call the greatest leadership training academy in the history of the world, in my humble opinion, the United States Marine Corps officer programs. And I learned as a Marine Corps officer how to lead people in difficult situations, how to lead people in stressful situations, how to lead people to be better than even they may think that they could be. And over that course of time, there were a couple of things that I got to see. Number one, I got to see that my understanding of leadership was very small, right? I used to think that, the bad leaders that were out there, the reason for bad leadership was because of bad people, bad characteristics in one way or another. Either you were an egomaniacal person who just cared about yourself, right? You were somebody who was lazy and just didn't really want to work hard and you wanted other people to do work for you. And so those were bad leaders. And then you had the people who really were just really selfish and didn't care about people. They just cared about the job and just wanting to get the job done. They didn't really care about taking care of people. That was my thought. That's what I believed bad leaders were. And I believe that if you cared enough and if you wanted to do the work and if you put your all into it, then you would be a good leader. It was just a foregone conclusion. And what I got to see when I was working in higher education, when I was getting my law degree and served as Dean's Fellow for a while, working behind the scenes in higher education, when I was commanding the company that I was commanding and doing the things that I was doing, one of the things that was really interesting was that I saw that there were a lot of leaders who cared a lot about people who were failing. There were a lot of leaders who worked really hard who were failing. There were a lot of leaders who were trying the best that they could to take care of the people that were in their charge, and they were failing. And those leaders were also having to suffer in silence. And that's really what got me into this work that I do now. As I worked and matriculated through the Marine Corps and became a company commander, became a chief legal officer, and a civil law officer, the thing that I got to see was that I actually had an aptitude for leadership. I could learn these things, but more importantly, because I had been a teacher, I could help other people to learn it, help other people to see what the obstacles were that were in their way. Because a lot of the clients that I work with, they're really intelligent. They're really capable. They've seen the same books. They've read the same books that I've read. They've seen the same TED Talks that I've watched. They've gone to the same workshops that I've been to, right? It's not that they don't know what they should be doing. And so many of my clients come to me knowing exactly what they should be doing. When I go into organizations and I talk to them about what does good leadership look like, they can tell me exactly what a good leader looks like. But then when we ask the question, well, what's keeping your day from looking like that, right? That's what I really help my clients with. I've learned to help them see what is the obstacle that is keeping them from being the type of leader that they want to be. And that's the thing that we go to work and to overcome, because oftentimes we're not really aware of what's keeping us from success. That's the blind spot that I help my clients to overcome. And so that's how I got to this work. And now I get to help leaders to see more, to do more, and to be more, and to do that same thing for those that they lead.
Wow. That is a fascinating journey. I feel like leaders are always under so much pressure to perform and to, be the head of their team and the figurehead in a way as well. And the team members always put so much pressure on them. And then when you get into that position yourself, I've sort of been there at university, for example, leading a team of people, and it's hard to appease everybody. So I can imagine that there's a lot of pressure on the leaders. So thank you for sharing your journey. That is really, really interesting. And you've obviously been in so many different situations and held so many positions that really have contributed to your expertise now. So kind of on that, my next sort of introductory question for our topic today, what do you think are some misconceptions about leadership?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And there are a number of them, but the top misconceptions I think that leaders run into is many leaders think that leadership is about them. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? Here's the interesting thing about leadership, and you've seen this even with the work you've done in university and being in a leadership role. The one thing that is true for every leadership position is that the role requires more than the leader is capable of. If it didn't, the leader wouldn't have a team. But so often we think that the role, the success or the failure of the role is really dependent on what we do or what we don't do. And that's not the key to leadership. Leadership isn't about what you do as much as it is about what you facilitate or what you enable to be done by those that you lead. And the more that we can focus on the people that we're leading and getting them to be their best, we actually wind up doing less and less. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite quotes is from the Tao Te Ching, right? And in that 2,500, 3,000, almost 3,000 year old work, Lao Tzu says one of the most profound things about leadership. He says, the greatest leaders, we barely know they exist. When their task is accomplished, when their job is done, the people say, we did it ourselves. So to your question, I think that the biggest misconception is that leaders think that leading is about what the leader does instead of about the results that the leader is instrumental in cultivating.
Yeah, that is such an interesting quote. Wow, that it makes total sense. Getting the people behind you to be their best, and therefore, you have to do less and less work because you're encouraging them to, I don't know, I guess be proactive and have initiative and that kind of thing. So that's really interesting. And we're going to dive more into this in a second. But first of all, we'd like to proceed with our segment, Have You Met Robert? This is our get to know you, so we can just get to know a little bit more about you and the things you like before we dive into our topic and get into the nitty gritty and the deep questions. So, first of all, do you have a favorite book that you'd like to share with us?
I do have a favorite book. One of the books that just literally blew my mind when I first read it is a book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
Yeah, I've heard of this one.
Yeah, I love the book, and I love it because of the fact that it stretches the limits of what our own limiting beliefs are. Right, it forces us to face up to our own limiting beliefs and see and ask the question: what could your life be like if you weren't telling yourself what you couldn't do?
Yeah, interesting. And do you have a movie that you've enjoyed recently?
It's a really good question. I think so. I'm normally watching kind of TV series and things, but the one movie that my wife and I were just watching before we came in, and it was just kind of nostalgic. It came out back when I was in college, when my wife was finishing up high school. So American Pie, hilarious little rom-com movie from the early 2000s, late 19 I think it was like 2001, 2002, or
Yeah.
maybe even 1999, but hilarious movie. We were just laughing so much in the nostalgia of that movie and how silly it was.
Amazing. Are you listening to any podcasts at the moment?
Yeah, a couple of podcasts that I love to listen to. So, The Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett is a phenomenal podcast that I love to listen to. There's another podcast that I generally try to tune into is the Alex Huberman podcast, and then the Jocko Willink podcast. For those of you all that Jocko Willink that know, Jocko Willink is he's a former Navy SEAL commander, but he's also a jiu-jitsu instructor, and I'm a jiu-jitsu instructor as well. So I love the fact that we got the military and jiu-jitsu element to it. He's a combat veteran, which is a lot different than what I served, but I never served in combat. So there's a difference there.
Wow, that's really cool. And some great recommendations for our audience as well. And do you have a role model? This could either be a personal or professional role model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've got a number of role models, but I think the top one that I would say is I always tell people when I grow up, I want to be what Tony Robbins is now. So the impact that he has on the world, the things that he does with feeding, feeding America, and now with working on feeding the world, the lives that he gets to impact because of the information that he's able to present and the transformation that he's able to facilitate in his events and in even his virtual events is phenomenal. That's what I want to do when I get older.
Amazing. Well, I'm sure you're already making that impact even though you are still young. Let's say that. Is there, finally, for you, this introductory question, is there a course or a class that has inspired you? This could be one that you've taken, but it could be one that you've taught as well.
Mhm. So I think the biggest thing that I would say that inspired me, as far as a course or a class, like I told you, I'm a jujitsu instructor, and
Yeah.
I was certified by the Gracies in California, as a Gracie certified instructor, and I have a master's degree in teaching. I taught school at all levels, K through 12, and I've even taught at the university level. But one of the things that was so amazing to me was the lessons that I learned during my jujitsu instructor training, because it was so important. I remember one lesson that Grandmaster Horian taught us, and it was about helping people to understand and helping people to get to learn. And one of the things that he did is he kind of did a juxtaposition. And for those of you all who don't know, Horian Gracie is the son of Elio Gracie, who was kind of one of the founders of Gracie Jiu Jitsu. And Horian Gracie is also one of the founders of the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championships. And he was the one who put it all together. His brother Hoist won the first and second and the fourth Ultimate Fighting Championship. Now, Grandmaster Horian, one of the things that he was explaining was he had one person go and kind of try to explain where a bottle was in the room, and the person that they were leading was blindfolded, and they were talking, and they were listening, and he was following his instructions, but it took probably about 3 or 4 minutes for the person to finally get to the water bottle that had been just set in the room. And when he talked about the experience that the person had, there was so much frustration. And as a matter of fact, each of them got more and more frustrated the closer and closer that they got to the water bottle and couldn't get it. And then he demonstrated what the type of teaching that we want to do, which I love to say, right? That former version of teaching is informational education, where you tell people things and they try to transform their lives, but they have to do all the transformational work. And then there's the transformational education, where what he did is he said, now watch what I do. And he grabbed the hand of the young man who was blindfolded, and he walked him over to where the bottle was, and he put his hand on the bottle, right?
Yeah.
He said, this is what we do as educators when we do it the right way. We get them the result, and we take them as close to the result as we can without having to translate it through words and through all this other type of stuff, because that's not how we learn. And that was such a mind-blowing experience for me. So that course, just in and of itself, all of the things that we learned about how to frame things, how to teach, with all the education that I've had in the master's degree and all the things that I had done, I learned more in that course than I had learned in my entire master's program.
Wow, that's amazing. It's amazing what something like jujitsu can teach you. Just those extra things that you do that aren't, necessarily related to the path that you're on in your career or in your education. You just gain so much real world experience. I found this in university. Doing co-curricular things was just such a mind-blowing experience, and just learning so much by doing it, which is really helpful as well. Now, we're going to dive into our questions for today. So, first of all, we have some definitions to just get through to help us along the way of our podcast. Firstly, how would you define affluence?
So I think that affluence is when you can continually live in a state of abundance rather than a state of scarcity.
Mm, that makes sense. Yes. Some sort of sense of freedom involved in that, maybe?
There is a sense of freedom that's involved in it, and the main freedom is the freedom from worry, right? And
Mm.
and to expound a little bit, that state of abundance is a mental state of abundance, knowing that you are walking in alignment with your purpose, knowing that each day you are getting to live and getting to experience life rather than having to do the things that are on your schedule.
Absolutely. And secondly, how would you define to somebody what constitutes a leadership role?
Awesome. Now, our definition of leadership is a little bit different, and it goes back to that myth of whether the leader is actually doing and what is the leader doing, right? And so when we define leadership at the Legacy Leadership Consulting Group, my company, what we do is we say leadership is facilitating the manifestation of greatness in others, right?
Wow.
And there's two components that are necessary for someone to be a leader, and it has nothing to do with title, it has nothing to do with authority. What it has to do with are these two characteristics, skills, or traits. Number one, you have to be able to see the greatness in others, right? I'm a firm believer that everybody is here for a reason, that everybody on this planet has greatness within them, has a seed of greatness within them that is yearning to grow and to blossom and to be brought into this world. And that for every person that actually is walking in their purpose, right? That is walking in abundance, that is living a life of affluence, that it's making the world better for everybody, not just for that person. And because everybody has greatness within them, I believe that leaders are those that can see that greatness, but more importantly, that can make it easier for that person to be great, right? That can call forth that greatness from others. And more importantly, the reason we intentionally use facilitate, right? It comes from the Latin root facile, and facile means easy, right? And so to facilitate is someone who makes something easier, right? And what we make easier is we make it easier for people to manifest their greatness. It's not necessarily that you make life easier, that you make it so that they don't have to struggle, but you make it easier for their greatness to come forward, for their greatness to be realized. Oftentimes that may mean giving them challenges, that may mean calling them to higher standards of excellence, but at the end of the day, that actually makes it easier for their greatness to show up. And that's what I think leadership is.
Amazing. That is such an in-depth definition, and it makes a lot of sense. Um, on the same kind of idea, what is empowerment?
Hmm. Great question. So, to empower someone is to help them to have power or to enable them to act on your behalf, right? So, again, when we go back and we talk about the leader is normally responsible for a job that takes more effort than they can do on their own, especially sustainably over time. And so it's necessary that a leader is able to empower someone else to act on their behalf and that means that you have to enable them. You have to do more than just tell them to do the work. You have to actually give them the authority, help them develop the ownership, help them to understand and have the clarity of understanding what the definition of done is, and more importantly than just where we're going, why we're going there. And
Mm,
if you can do that, you can truly empower someone to act on your behalf.
yeah, absolutely. And so you believe that leadership empowerment are like very closely connected and that that's very important?
Yes, tremendously so. And again, I believe that regardless of our title or our positions of authority, we can lead and we can empower anyone that we come into contact with because we have the ability to see the greatness that is inherent within them and to make that greatness easier for them to manifest in the world, regardless of if we're the janitor talking to the CEO or vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this case, what do you think is the relationship between leadership and affluence?
Great question. So I firmly believe, like I was saying earlier, that when the more people that are living and manifesting their greatness, the more abundance there is in the world, dramatically impacts everybody. But if we want to take it from, on a microcosmic scale, if we look at from, for example, entrepreneurs, the better you as an entrepreneur are able to help the people around you to do extraordinary things, the more you all can win because there's a synergistic effect. You see, one of the things that we talk about is kind of, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but it'll make sense in reference to the question. A lot of times people talk about work-life balance, and right, as an entrepreneur, especially, work-life balance is one of those things that is, it's kind of like the Loch Ness monster, right? Everybody's trying to figure it out, and it's a mythical creature. And
For
and I
sure.
firmly believe that work-life balance doesn't exist, and the reason that it doesn't exist is because what it is a disintegration of ourselves as a person, and we're trying to balance two different sides of ourselves. The
Mm,
problem is we're one person, and our work and our home and our community and our everything that we do is not as if we're different people doing those things. And so what we strive for more is work-life harmony. You see, in music, when you have harmony, you have different notes that are vibrating, and when they vibrate together, the beauty of their vibrating together is that they create a different type of resonance, a different type of vibration that wasn't there before they were vibrating together. And
yeah.
see, that's what we can do with our lives. We can make every part of our life synergistically integrated so that our work dramatically influences and positively impacts our home, and our home positively impacts our community, and our community positively impacts our work. And now you have this synergistic resonance where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And so when we talk about how can we ensure that we are empowering others and how is leadership moving to affluence, the beauty of it is when you have everybody moving in their flow state, in their affluent state, the synergy of those interactions create more than what was there just by the individuals being there. And that's the power
Yeah.
of leadership.
Wow, that is so amazing. Okay, so work-life harmony, like musical harmony. I love that metaphor. That's beautiful. I mean, I'm a musician, so I get it. It makes sense. So let's explore a little further then into leadership. What do you think are the key mindset shifts that are necessary for leaders so that they can foster a culture of prosperity and affluence, like we talked about, within their organizations?
Oh, great question. I think the first thing that leaders have to develop is an understanding that they are coaching more than they are teaching, right?
Hmm.
I heard a great quote. It said, people need to be reminded much more than they need to be taught,
Yes, I can agree.
right? And so often when we come into places, again, the first thing that we have to remember as a leader is that it's our job to see the greatness in the people that we lead. It's not to think that there is this kind of this void of greatness that we are now pouring ourselves into, right? That's one of the models of leadership that a lot of people struggle with. It's the what I call it the burnout model, right? If you think about like a coffee mug, everybody goes through and you pour coffee and coffee, and then eventually the coffee mug gets empty. And what do you have to do, of course, when the coffee mug's empty? If you want more coffee, you have to go and brew more coffee. Now,
Mm.
while you're brewing more coffee, here's the fun part. Everybody who wants coffee can't get any more coffee. The only way that you can get coffee is if you pour coffee out of your mug into somebody else's mug. And so this pattern of pouring from scarcity and emptiness propagates itself. That's really the thing that a lot of people think about when they're thinking about leadership. They're thinking that I have to go and pour myself and pour from my lack into you, and now I'm drained at the end of the day. Even if you're doing great, one of us is doing great, but the other one is now drained, and now I've got to go recharge and reassess. That's unsustainable. Instead, what we want to do is we want to be able to think, how can I pour from my abundance? And I want to give you and your listeners a mental picture. If you've ever seen a champagne tower, right, where you've got the one glass and then you've got three glasses under that and you've got four glasses
Yeah.
under that, right? And amazingly enough, when you pour the champagne into the top glass, it receives and it receives and it receives and it receives, and then it gets full. And then something miraculous happens. It begins to overflow. And from its overflowing, it then pours into the next layer of glasses. Now, here's the beauty of this: it poured into those glasses from its abundance, not from its scarcity. It didn't have to empty itself in order to give more to the others. But here's the other really cool part: the way that it poured into the next level is the exact way that that next level pours into the level underneath it, and is the exact way that that next level pours into the level underneath it. So that each level, when you are living from abundance, you are not only affluent yourself, but you're teaching and training affluence. And so the long way around this question is the paradigm that has to shift is that we have to realize that what we're giving is not from our scarcity, from our lack, it's from our abundance. And part of that is being able to call out the magic that is in the other person, being able to see that they actually have the answers. There's a great book called The Coaching Habit that I highly recommend to people to read because it helps you to understand how you can ask questions that prompt the innovative portions of the brain of the people that you're trying to coach and that you're trying to lead, that prompt them to make connections that they may not have made before of things that are already in their brain, not where they have to rely on you bestowing some sort of wisdom on them, but rather they're relying on you to be their guide rather than their gatekeeper. You're not there as the leader deciding whether they're good enough. You're there as the guide, walking alongside of them, helping them to navigate the pathway that they're navigating. But here's the beauty of it. They're the ones that have to do the work. And the better you are at guiding, not only do they learn to do the work, but they also learn how to guide.
Mm, yeah. Wow, even more beautiful imagery with the champagne glasses. It really helps me so much to picture things like that so that I can see how what you mean when you say we have to pour from our abundance instead of from the scarcity. It's people so often try to pour from their scarcity, I feel like, because they're burnt out or whatever, but they just have to keep going. When you picture it like a champagne glass, you can really see that it's not going to work because there is no champagne. So it's really helpful imagery. So now that we've spoken about pouring from that abundance, how do you think that that creates a more prosperous environment for everybody around?
Yeah, like I said, I think that pouring from abundance, number one, it teaches people to pour from abundance.
Mm,
It doesn't create the scarcity mindset that is so often what's driving our decision making, right? What most of us see, and here's something that we didn't talk about earlier, but I think it's part of the reason, again, why I got into this work. So
yeah.
many leaders, right? We get into leadership, and here's the pathway, the traditional pathway. We become very good professionals, right? And
Mm,
how do you become a good professional? You become a good professional by minimizing distraction, by being able to focus, being able to be the person that can get the job done regardless of external circumstances. People know that if they give you something to do, it's going to get done because life is always happening, right? As we
yes.
say nowadays, life is lifing all the time, right?
Mm,
And so it's not a question of whether or not there are reasons for you to not get it done. The top professionals are the people who get it done in spite of all of the reasons why they may not have gotten it done. And part of that process, what we have to train ourselves to do is to not pay attention to the idiosyncrasies of other people and to the external problems that other people have that might keep the job from getting done. What we also do is we train ourselves to deal with our own idiosyncrasies that might keep us from getting things done. Now, here's the funny part. Along that journey, we're not learning to work with people. We're not learning to help people grow and to, excuse me, bring people along with us. As a matter of fact, that's what we're punished for along that journey, right? If you've ever been in school and you've been working, right, and you all remember this, if you were turning in your homework or you were working on a test, if you were actually helping somebody else to get better answers or you were asking for help from one of your classmates, there's a specific word that's called all around the world. It's called cheating. And cheating is not academically appropriate, right? It's one
mhm.
of those things that we know that we get punished for. But isn't it the smartest thing in the world to collaborate with people to make sure that you get the answer right? Yes, but we actually are conditioned not to do that behavior. And even in the work world, you're conditioned not to really work and collaborate together because then you can't shine, you can't stand out. And so we
Mm,
do all of this
yes.
work trying to stand out, trying to show that we're professional. And then once we do it, here's the reward. Hey, you're a really great professional. Now we need you to take over this team of 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 other mediocre professionals. And we need you to get them to be able to be really good professionals. But guess what skills you don't have? The skills of dealing with other people's idiosyncrasies and trying to help
Yeah.
them to be different and figuring out how they can be awesome because you've only been paying attention to how you can be awesome. And that's not
Mm,
a knock on you. That's not selfishness. That's the way that we've been conditioned. So, one of the things I teach my clients all the time is it's really important for you to realize that most people have not had the appropriate training to be good leaders. So, when you get into this position, and it's going to be a mindset, a paradigm shift, you've been good at what you've done for so long. Most of us, by the time we get into leadership roles, we've been one of the best, if not the best, right? In that top echelon, upper echelon of performers for the better part of a decade or 2 decades by the time we get into leadership roles. And now you've got to start at the bottom as a novice again.
mm,
That oftentimes is the existential crisis that a lot of people struggle with. And so as we go forward, one of the things I want to implore on your audience is just to remember that you're going to be learning. One of my favorite quotes says, "The master at anything has failed more times than the novice has even attempted."
yes.
And so it's so
Wow.
important for us to remember, just give yourself grace as you're working and moving on this leadership journey. I
Yeah.
hope, did that answer your question?
I think so. Even if it didn't answer, that was beautiful wisdom. So I'm happy either way. So oftentimes, people like teachers or lecturers would be key leaders in our lives. When you speak to people about, leaders in their lives and what they loved about them, like what they loved about their teacher, for example, what are the most common things that come up? What are the most common traits or situations that people talk about where they go, this person was a great leader or a great mentor or positive influence in my life?
Yeah, no, that's a phenomenal question. In the research that I've done and the studying that I've done and talking with so many of my clients, one of the
Mm,
things that is the most cited kind of memory or artifact of good leadership is something that I think will immediately resonate, but it's not the first thing that will come to people's minds, right? You would think
right.
that it would be, they were very organized, or they were, very diligent, or they were, trustworthy, or whatever. The
Yeah.
interesting thing that I've heard over and over and over again is that they believed in me,
Mm.
and they made me believe that I was capable of more than I thought I was capable of.
Yeah, of course. Because if somebody makes you believe in yourself, then you go, oh, maybe I can do it, you
That's
know?
exactly it, right?
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to, and it's the reason why I say that one of the characteristics of leaders that is necessary, it's a necessary component, is the ability to see greatness in others.
Mm.
Because we as human beings, we crave to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, to feel like we belong, right? So many people don't realize this. When you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Abraham Maslow, he's one of the fathers of American psychology and of modern psychology. One of the things he talks about is the hierarchy of needs that we as human beings have. At the bottom of that pyramid or that hierarchical pyramid is, of course, food, water, clothing, shelter, right? Survival needs, right? Things that keep you from dying. And then, of course, the next level up is then safety needs. Again, things that will keep you from dying.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, and a lot of people, that would think that, figuring out what my personal mission is, or what my self-esteem, right? How do I think about myself, my identity, all the rest of that. Most people would think that would be next. But what's actually next is our need for belonging, our need for relationship, our need to feel loved, to feel like we matter. That is the need that hits us most. And so one of the best things that leaders can do is to make people feel seen, make them feel heard, make them feel valued, make them feel like they matter. When you can do that, you earn the right to influence people. You earn the right to give them advice. You earn the right to cast a vision and actually have them want to go where you're trying to go.
Interesting. When you, I'm going to throw something out there at the moment. When you said that people, what is the most like common thing people cite as a good leadership trait, for example, I thought of fun. I don't know how important you think this is, but the teachers that really were able to build the most trust with me or communicate the best to me during university were the ones that kind of did it through humor and didn't appear too serious. Do you think that's maybe not? Maybe not didn't appear too serious is maybe the wrong phrasing, but they definitely had some kind of humorous qualities. Have you heard of that before?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that happens with humor is that there's psychological safety in humor, right? Especially when the
Right.
person can be self-deprecating, when we can be laughing together rather than laughing at one another, then we are no longer adversarial. Again, there is that sense of belonging. Story is another thing that a lot of leaders are really good at crafting story or crafting ceremony where everybody is allowed to be part of the story, right?
Mm,
And again, it's all related to that idea of creating an environment where I feel like I belong, where I feel like I am I am safe, where I feel like I can strive, I can try to grow, I can move towards something and not fear failure and ridicule and and excommunication.
right. Yeah. Well, I'd like to now ask you about some more real world applications, what people can actually do. What do you think leaders can do to be more empowered?
Hmm. Good question. Um, I think one of the things that leaders have to be able to do if they want to be empowered is to really understand what you're trying to do in the first place. One of the first
Mm.
things that I teach all of my students, all of my clients when I'm coaching, and I coach C-suite leaders on down to entry level managers. And one of the first things that we try to do is we try to figure out what does success look like for them. You see, so often we get on the pathway that we think we're supposed to be on. We start shoulding, right? Well, I should do this or I should do that. But we have to step back and actually look at what do we want to do? What is our purpose? Where is our life's journey leading us? And are we in alignment with that life's journey? Because if we're out of alignment, right, it's just like that whole concept of work life balance instead of harmony. If we're out of alignment, we're not going to be able to harmonize. We're not going to be able to synergize. And so the biggest thing to be able to be empowered is to know and to have an inner knowing, a resonance, if you would, that you're moving in the right direction. Before you can lead someone else, you have to know that you're going where you need to be going.
Mm. And then I suppose similar question, what can leaders do to make their team feel more empowered?
hmm And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, making them feel like they belong. One of the best things that you can do to make people feel like they belong is listen. And not just listen as in be physically present but mentally absent, right? Or not just listen to respond, but to listen to actually understand, to allow the people that you lead to know that you really care what they think, you really care what's going on with them, that you ask questions that really pulls out of them how they see the world. What are the things that were the obstacles that are in their way? One of the questions that I've taught a number of leadership teams that I've worked with, and it always it never ceases to amaze me, the profound impact that it has. It's a simple question, but we start doing it because one of the things that is really interesting about leadership is if you are someone who gives constructive feedback, people love those types of leaders. But more importantly, if you're someone who's able to give constructive feedback and receive feedback about your leadership, it dramatically improves the engagement of the people that you lead. And one of the questions that I always teach is a simple question that we ask quarterly. And it goes like this: if you could snap your fingers and change anything about how we do business, what would it be? And so often, what the leaders see is that initially they're afraid of that question because they're like, oh my God, they're going to try to change everything. They're going to try to, our entire mission, our entire vision. And so that's never the things that people are worried about and trying to change.
Yeah.
So often, the things that they want to change are simple things that the leaders have at their discretion to change that don't matter to the business at all, but matter tremendously to the people that they lead. And the only reason that they haven't changed it is because they were unaware that the people wanted it to be changed. But by doing so, it dramatically impacts how the people see the leaders because the people see that they asked for something to change and that it was changed. And so now they know that the leaders are hearing them and they can feel safe that they don't have to exist perpetually in whatever discomfort they may be in because they know that their leaders are listening and they are hearing them and that what they think and what they care about matters. The transformation that happens in the relationships, I mean, it always is so heartwarming, so amazing when I see it, and I love the teams that employ it.
Yeah, I love that we've been talking about this listening and fostering the sense of belonging. I think that's really important. And certainly, I keep relating this back to university, but I think it really is important for teachers and lecturers and things like that. Certainly, the classes that I felt like I belonged the most were the ones where the teacher was fostering that sense of belonging and that you could trust them as
Right.
as a mentor as well, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things. And I mean, from military training to
Mm.
martial arts training as well, but even in manufacturing, right? I remember I had a team lead that I was training. She worked in a distribution center, and she was ready to retire. She was tired of dealing with these kids who thought they knew everything, and she was so frustrated. And one of the things that I taught her how to do was to first to communicate what good looks like and to give the team an opportunity to see what she saw. And so she started she started having her tier meetings at the beginning of her shifts. And she started making a board where they could see who was doing the best and who wasn't doing so well and all the rest of that. So they could see exactly like what she saw. And amazingly enough, it allowed her to have different types of conversations because people would start asking her questions now because she was able to tell them, here's where we're going. This is what we're trying to do. If you have any questions, come ask me. And she would let them ask questions. Well, why are we doing it this way? Or how? And she was so reinvigorated because she actually got to have non-complaining conversations with them, but actually intellectual conversations where she got to teach and she got to train and they got to see how much she knew. She was so ecstatic after I coached her for about 10 weeks. And she was so ecstatic after that. She was gonna continue working for another 5 years now because she was like, I found what I love to do now. This is awesome. I didn't want to retire, but now I really can stay here and I can really do this. And so she loved it. It was awesome.
That's beautiful. Well, I want to move on now to our practices and habits section, where I just want to ask you, what is a habit that you would recommend practicing for leaders to maintain that empowered leadership?
Yeah. And it goes back to the coaching habit. I would really highly recommend that leaders learn how to ask coaching questions. There's 3 really important types of questions that you want to learn how to ask. You want to learn how to ask probing questions, right? Probing questions are questions that dig into an issue. So you want to ask questions and you want to stay away from why questions. So there's 3 types. We'll go through the 3 types first. So there's probing questions, there's expanding questions, and then there's closure questions. And one of the big things that leaders want to shy away from is asking why questions. Why'd you do that? Well, why can't you be here on time? Why can't you get this project done? Right? Because most of those questions we have learned that there's often a comma, you idiot, attached to the end of that question as an implication, right? It's not there, but everybody can feel it. Everybody can sense it. And what you want, again, is you want them to get the sense that you're interested in them, that you're not judging them, but you're actually trying to learn. So you want to ask better what and how questions. That habit in and of itself, when you see something that you think is off, lean into that curiosity and get a sense of what is actually going on in the mind of the other. That's one thing that you can do. And then the second thing is when you're trying to find solutions, instead of telling people why their plans won't work, help them to see the problem that you're seeing with their solution and ask them to overcome that problem. Right? Just by doing that, what happens is you walk away from the table. Instead of being adversaries sitting on other sides of the table, you now get to sit on the same side of the table with them as a teammate and look at the problem and ask them to help you solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. I love that you said stay away from why questions. I think that the why questions also, if you say to someone, oh, why didn't you do this? Or, as you said, why were you late or whatever? It's also really easy, I find, to just make something up in that case so that you look like less of an idiot, like you were saying. But if you build some kind of trust and ask the right questions, it's easier to be truthful with, your manager or your boss or whoever it is that's leading you, your team leader. Much easier to be truthful if you build that trust, for sure.
Exactly. Now, one thing I want to say, because I know that we've been going over a lot of these individual kind of ideas and things like that. I want everybody to know that at the end of our talk, and I know that we're going to talk a little bit about this, but there's a primer that we've created, because I know this is difficult. So many of our clients are like, but wait, what questions should I ask and when should I ask them? We've created a primer so that in each of the different core strategies that we teach, there's some internal questions that you can ask yourself on how to think through these things, but then some external questions that you can ask your team on how to do those as well. And we can talk about, we give this away for free. It's a gift that we love to share to help people. We can talk about how people can get access to that a little bit later in the call.
Yeah. Well, let's do it in a second. So firstly, we have our open mic segment. This is your chance to talk about anything you're passionate about. It doesn't even have to be related to the discussion that we've had so far, but it can be. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, awesome. I think, just dovetailing off of this, as you can tell, leadership is something that is really near and dear to my heart, again, because one, there's so many people who suffer with bad leaders, right? And again, I was one of those people. I've had bad bosses. I've had people that I didn't like that were in charge of me. And it feels like it's a never ending, torture, right? It's just, you never know when it's going to be over. And one stat that I saw that was really mind blowing is that 1 out of every 2 people, and this is a US stat, but Gallup has done these studies in other countries around the world, and it's pretty similar around the world. One in
Sure.
every 2 people who leaves the job voluntarily leaves because of their leader, leaves because they don't get along with or don't want to continue working for the leadership that they're working for.
Wow.
Leadership is such an impactful part of organizations. As a matter of fact, 70% of the factors related to employee engagement have to do with leadership. Why am I saying this? Because I believe that if you're someone who cares about people, if you're someone who cares about your organization, it is imperative that you learn how to be a better leader. Especially because even if you're someone who cares about, right, if you're an activist and you care about, political causes and all the rest of that, fun fact, we spend 35% of our adult lives at work.
Hmm.
That's more time than we spend sleeping. That's more time than we spend hanging out with our families. That's more time than we spend in any community activities that we're engaged in. If you really want to change the world, the greatest place for you to change the world is with the people that you work with. Because when you can lead, when you can influence, regardless of title, regardless of authority, or because they have to listen to you, right? Title and authority will get you compliance, but connection will get you influence. And you can connect with anybody if you learn these strategies that we talk about. In one of the books that I've written that really walks through this is a book called Courageous Communication. And in that book, we walk through, as I was telling you all, the 5 core strategies that you need to master so that you can communicate and connect and influence anybody, regardless of your title and authority. And the reason that I want to point that out is because I feel like so often we specialize leadership and responsibility. We're like, well, if I had this title, or if I was in the C-suite, or if I was this person, or if I was president, or if I was whatever it is, if I had those roles, then I could lead, then I could do things. But I want to remind you of what Gandhi said. Gandhi said we need to be the change that we wish to see in the world. And I want my goal is for people to see the agency that they have, the ability that they have to make a difference where you are, to bloom where you're planted, and to start a ripple in the pond that becomes a wave, that becomes a movement that changes the world. And it starts with your ability to connect one-to-one. And so again, for those that are out there, if you would like to get more information or get the primer, we have also, we talked about earlier, Defining Success. We also have a special Defining Success self-reflection tool that we have available as well. I think in the show notes, we'll be able to get you all links to these things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I want to give those to you as kind of our gift to say, I see the greatness that is within you. If you are someone who is striving, if you are someone who is wanting to make the world better, I believe that you have greatness within you. I believe that you're here for a reason. And our company and what we do is specifically designed to help those who want to be their best and who want to help others to be their best. Because the last thing I'll say is we believe, right? You've heard the old adage, if you give a person a fish, you feed them for a day. If you teach a person to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. Well, there's another level to this, and this gets to our work-life harmony and our synergy. If you can teach a person to teach fishing, you can feed the whole world forever. And that's what we are in the business of. We want to help you along your journey to learn how to lead yourself and learn how to lead others. But more importantly, we want to help you to become the type of person that can create systems, that can create environments that build other leaders, that pour from your abundance, so that you can continue to cascade that lesson all throughout the world. So,
Well, let's continue this, because we're going to conclude our episode, but if our listeners want to find out more about you and your work and your company, where should they go?
yeah. So one of the things that you can do, you can find me on LinkedIn at Robert Heath Senior. 007. And I love James Bond stuff. You can also find me at our website, T as in Tom, LLCG. That's the Legacy Leadership Consulting Group, TLLCG.com. And if you want to reach out to us, you can email us at support at TLLCG, and we can definitely talk to you about some of the roundtables and some of the workshops that we have coming up, and just connecting with us.
Absolutely. Well, I will put all of those links in our show notes so that people can more easily find you and get in touch if they would like to.
Awesome.
So we do have to wrap up our episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've certainly learned a lot, and we really appreciate you coming on the show. So thank you.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And to our audience, I hope you have learned a lot from Robert today, just as I have, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Wealth Pathways, the Affluence Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at affluence.lifemanagementsciencelabs.com, where you can join our movement. I'm Marie Stella. Thanks for tuning in.